This is a low dopamine podcast, so go elsewhere for your sensationalism. Breaking news, Liverpool have agreed a deal to sign England centre-back Mark Gay from Crystal Palace. Generational transfer window. Mate, they'll be talking about this transfer window from Liverpool in 5 years' time as something that was just unheard of.
It's a Van Dijk Alisson, but potentially 3 players instead of 2. I take every phone call because I don't know if it's going to be work or not, and that's the freelance life that we live in. It's like, what's
Ollie,
this number?
Can you cover the snowplow Olympics in Azerbaijan next week?
Boom, done. Yeah.
Hello and welcome along to Not Another Sports Pod, episode number 57 with myself, David, and Mr. Oliver Wilson on the pod this week. Let's talk about how Alexander Isak is quite possibly a £125 million bargain. I want to ask you as well, Ollie, is Erling Haaland overrated? Amorim and Potter survive for now. It's all kicking off at the US Open. Scott Parker said that VAR is threatening to turn football into the most sterile game there is. Is he right? And of course, we're going to have live reaction to the Ryder Cup picks from Mr. Oliver Wilson. But Ollie, I want to start, as possibly all good football podcasts should start, with a bit of trivia for you. You ready?
Beautiful.
And for our listeners at home.
Beautiful.
So, James Milner scored for Brighton at the weekend against Manchester City at the age of 39 years and 239 days. There's only one player in Premier League history who is older than him that has also scored in the Premier League. Who is it?
Teddy Sheringham, 40 years old.
Very strong.
I
Did you
watched
ever look at
Match
that
of the
this
Day.
weekend, or how did that just pop into the... or did you just know it before?
I watched Match of the Day this week.
It was on
there
Match
at
of
the
the Day,
list.
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it would have taken me a while to get Teddy Sheringham for sure. I think if I hadn't seen that graphic, probably about 2 hours ago when I was catching up on everything to do with the Premier League this weekend. And as Big Donny Trump would say, there's a lot of catching up to do. There's a lot of things, many, many good things, a lot of bad things they've done as well, though, in the Premier League. I mean, it has been a whirlwind of a weekend in the top flight. And yet, miserably boring at points as well. I was chatting with somebody today who turned off Arsenal-Liverpool at half-time. Was like, I cannot be bothered to watch the rest of this game. I watched Newcastle-Leeds. That was not an advertisement for Premier League football. That was barely an advertisement for a championship game. Leeds in the championship were more exciting than in every time they played under the lights at Ellen Road than they were on the weekend against Newcastle. I mean, it was dire. That was absolutely dire.
Okay, but by contrast, scrolling back a bit to a week ago, Monday Night Football at St James's Park 7 days ago, Ollie, Newcastle 2, Liverpool 3 was one of the best Premier League games I've seen in an awful long time. I think that was the most watched thing on Sky Sports, I think, for the last few months even. So I get it goes up and down. I mean, are we pretending that there were never 0-0s in the early noughties or the 90s? Are we pretending that Champions League final between Milan and whenever it was like the worst Champions League final? You know, I don't know. Bad football happens. But just very quickly before you jump in, Ollie, last season Sky Sports viewing figures were actually down 17%. That's not 7%. That's 17%. Sky Sports viewing figures were down last season. That's worth thinking about.
Probably because they didn't back the Donald. I think that's one of the reasons. He's said that his effect on the NFL has been that in the US. You know, ratings have been down. I think the Donald's done that as well to the Premier League because they've not backed him.
That's two obscure Donald Trump references within the first 3 minutes. Let's get back to business and go through some of these Premier League fixtures first of all, Ollie.
Well, just quickly, that recency bias, though, of that Newcastle game on Monday Night Football is interesting because it was great and it was a dramatic finish. But, like, there's this nostalgia around Barclays era and everything like that when it comes to the Premier League, which is weird to think because we were pre-Barclays era, you and I, in terms of watching it and being interested in the Premier League. And there are so many games that actually picking like a top 5 games in Premier League football of all time is so difficult. And the way people jumped on that Monday Night Football of being like, one of the best games I've ever seen in my life in the Premier League. And it's like, how long have you been watching it? It's like 4 years, 5 years. Is this an American that's only got into it since NBC? What are we talking here? It was a great game of football, but the hyperbolic nature and reactionary nature, it creates the clicks. But like, you know, let's just not be too crazy with it. There's 2 Newcastle-Liverpool games that I think were better.
Ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, this is a low dopamine podcast, so go elsewhere for your sensationalism. But Ollie, look, I mean, Was the Premier League better? Yes, possibly it was. I don't want to go on and on and on about this, but VAR is a huge part of this because VAR just stifles and kills so many moments. It kills any sense of momentum. It's just so big. Go on then, let's start with it. Scott Parker then, he said that football's going to become the most sterile sport there is. I've said this time and again on this podcast. The absolute arrogance to believe that football is going to continue to be this overwhelming monopoly in the world of sport, I think, is completely misguided. I think younger generations aren't going to fall in love with football, become addicted to football in the same way that our generation was because of the VAR interference. And that if anyone hasn't seen it, there's a VAR moment in the game between Chelsea and Fulham at the weekend, which is just the most bonkers, ridiculous decision. And the fact that the emotion of that moment and the potential narrative and the sway of the game has been robbed by a bunch of people in an office so far away in a completely different atmosphere and backdrop is just insane. Anyway, VAR, I don't know what to say, mate. I don't know what to say.
Danny Murphy was spot on, particularly with that moment in the Chelsea-Fulham game of Chalobah's the one that's made the tackle. It's a piece of control that's been forced now for the foot to come down on Chalobah because of Chalobah's lunge in where he's not taken the ball. So the only way I saw that was a free kick to Fulham because the Chelsea players come in and try to take the ball off somebody who is pirouetting on it and has forced them to be able to not complete their pirouette and potentially could have lost the ball. Now, they didn't. Fulham went down the other end and scored. That goal never should be brought back. The interesting thing to me was that then later on in the game with the incidents, the kind of 4 incidents that were being highlighted before Chelsea scored, their second was from the penalty spot. There was the idea that there was the handball from João Pedro that I think considering how handballs have been assessed over the last 12 to 18 months, that was a handball. But there's also Moises Caicedo with a challenge on the edge of the box where his foot comes down on a Fulham player's foot. Now, that's exactly what Chalobah was awarded the free kick for a foot inadvertently coming down on his foot. Now, Caicedo's put a challenge in and missed the ball and his foot has come down on top of the Fulham player's foot. So, for just highlighting how much ambiguity and lack of consistency there is in these decisions. You've got 2 challenges that are similar almost in nature of a foot inadvertently coming down and catching another player's foot. And both of those have gone to Chelsea and gone in Chelsea's way. And I would feel so massively aggrieved for Fulham, for Silva, for everybody at that club involved about how that result went, because they shouldn't have had a goal disallowed, which is a game changer. Shouldn't have had a penalty given against them, which is a game changer. And they've been robbed at Stamford Bridge by VAR that is an absolute joke. And I'm sorry, but even the announcements from the officials,
awful.
It doesn't matter whether you announce it or not. If the decision is wrong, and every single person in world football is looking at that and going, that seems incorrect to me. I don't know what you can do. It doesn't make it any better.
I don't know where we go from here. The only way I think to save it is to give one side each 1 challenge per match. And at the very least, it means it doesn't slow the game down for tiny, innocuous things. And if your challenge is incorrect, then you lose it. And if it's correct, then you keep it. That's the only way I think to minimise it. Obviously, I'd get rid of it entirely, but for some reason, that doesn't seem to be part of the part of the kind of the conversation, unfortunately, because I think the game's a lot worse for it. And I think what ends up happening, I mean, you talk about how much you cover the Championship and how great a league that is, and part of the organic nature of the Championship remains the fact that there's no VAR, right? And and the Championship stands kind of alone in many ways. I mean, if you look at the entire top flight across basically every country in Europe and beyond now, there is VAR. Sweden are the only league that have rejected it. I mean, there's VAR in the Paraguayan top flight now. I mean, it's just absolutely everywhere. So, yeah, you can't escape it. Anyway, let's talk some football. Liverpool 1, Arsenal 0. The cat's out the bag with Mikel Arteta, and if I was an Arsenal fan, and I was talking to my friend Mike about this morning, if I was an Arsenal fan, I'd be hoping that this result has come early enough in the season to shake Arteta, because it is now quite a loud part of the football chat in this country that Mikel Arteta has the handbrake on, and he is ultimately too defensive in the biggest moments when you consider the variety of attacking talent he's got, and this defensive mindset is going to cost him future league titles and has already cost him potentially league titles. And that has gone from being a fringe discourse to now it's quite firmly part of the established conversation that Mikel Arteta won't win a league title because he is too defensive. And I'm sorry to go back to this, but opening weekend of the season, you've got Martin Odegaard, when they're 1-0 up at Old Trafford, with 5 minutes to go, he's trying to play for the corner flag. That was a red flag for me. I think that the starting lineup at Anfield, right? You spent 70 million quid on Eberechi Eze, who I think he's one of the most underrated players in the Premier League. I think he's absolutely fantastic footballer. When you spent 70 million on him, forget the price tag, just the quality of the footballer. When you spend that money favouring Merino in a defensive central midfield instead of Eze, playing Eze as the number 10, I think is extremely unusual. I think Arteta came for 0-0 and he got a 1-0 defeat. That game was 0-0. It was a 0-0 game, Ollie. But Dominic Szoboszlai does something crazy, you lose it 1-0, and then we extrapolate these narratives out of it that Arsenal are this incredibly defensive side. And I do think that Mikel Arteta is in real danger now of having a group of footballers that he's so afraid of losing that he's ultimately not going to win a league title. And sometimes it's not even the personnel. The personnel's a big part of it because I think the team selection was wrong. But the other part of it is, what's he saying to the players? Like, why doesn't he just go into the dressing room just before kickoff and say, we can lose this football match? Like, if we lose 3-1 at Anfield, it's okay. There's still 35 games of the season left. Eze, you're starting. We're going to go and we're going to take this Liverpool side on. And I don't know, man. I think that something might just have clicked. And for me now, the issue is, how stubborn is Mikel Arteta? Is he prepared to maybe change tact a little bit? 2 or 3% we're talking here or there in the biggest games. Or is he so stubborn that he believes that he can 1-0 his way and set piece his way to a Premier League title?
The trouble is as well in doing that is if it isn't successful, you win no favours from the neutral or anybody else. I mean, that's one of the things lobbied at Jose Mourinho, like some of the worst title victories in Premier League history, but it was effective. So at least you had the silverware at the end of the year, so you can have the press conference 10 years later at Manchester United going, big deal, I've got the 3 titles. Like that's the joy of that man, that he was able to do it so successfully. If Mikel Arteta is going to try and play defensive football, you have to be successful. Burnley last year would have been lambasted had they not got promoted, for sure. Like, and I admired the way they did it because, again, if you're successful with it and you get what you need to get done, then it's a great thing. What Arteta needs, though, is to win a Premier League title. Like, Arsenal are a consistent Champions League side now. They're considered a top 4 kind of nailed on, and they're now considered a side that has to be able to go and compete and win a title. That does require an element of change if what you've been doing for the last few years hasn't got you there. And I completely agree. I just had a quick check. Ez has been at the club now for over a week. Like, this isn't one of these ones where he was signed yesterday. We don't want to chuck him in straight away. And to be honest, even like up and down the country in every single league in the EFL and in the Premier League, you see players getting bought 2 days ago and they get chucked on anyway. Like, first game, maybe give them a start, see what happens, or we'll throw you in after 60 minutes, sure. And as it came on off the bench, but like, you've paid 70 million to buy an impact player. You're not paying that sort of money to buy an if, buts, or maybe. You've got somebody who I would imagine for that kind of money, and Christ, you would hope for that sort of money, is meant to be starting every game possible if you've decided that that's what you need to do. And it's not just, screw you, Tottenham, will mug you over a bit and get the guy that you really wanted as well, which I don't think actually comes into it, although it's a nice storyline. But yeah, so this is a guy that you spend 70 million on this player to play in this game, in games like this at Anfield, to be that X factor, to go and attack and take on a Liverpool side that you know are maybe not at their best at the start of this season yet, but that are still able to consistently grind out victories. And at the end of the day, Arne Slot, he's got money in the bank because he's got a Premier League title already in his back pocket. So yeah, what he does this year, it affects and it matters, but he's got the safety of silverware. You don't really have that as Mikel Arteta with Arsenal. What you have instead is this grumbling discord that it's been a long time now, and we're kind of getting into that latter Wenger stage of nothing's really changing, and the modus operandi isn't quite taking us to the next level, and we need something else. And I think you're right. This sort of result, actually, so early in the season, is a huge, huge problem for Arteta in the manner you go. You've had one shot on target at Anfield. This is meant to be a team that you are trying to take to task and dethrone as the best side in English football. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. You need to create chances and be far more attacking. A 0-0 draw at Anfield isn't necessarily... Sure, if you win the title at the end of the year, you might look back and say, oh, maybe that's a great result. But right now, that doesn't feel like a great result for Arsenal, particularly with the amount of frustration there's been over Yoker as being the star centre-forward that they've signed. It hasn't exactly been an enthusiastic transfer window, I think, for a lot of Arsenal fans.
And I think also, Ollie, you make a good point when you say they've got to take the title off Liverpool. As in, you've got to go to Anfield and try and win because Liverpool are the champions, right? And I think that Gary Neville made a great point that this is a title-winning squad without a title. And if you go off that thesis, then the thing that's holding them back is the manager. And that won't be set in stone until they don't actually win the title this year. Maybe they do, and all of a sudden we rip up these narratives and start again, right? But the winners write history, and that's why Liverpool, who are probably equally as defensive as Arsenal at the weekend, but Dominic Szoboszlai puts a ridiculous free kick in the top corner, and then the winners just write history. So they can say, well, we scored a goal, and you didn't. You came for the 0-0. So I think it's a big old 8 or 9 months for Mikel Arteta. And it'll be very interesting to see during the international break when he's got just that little bit more time to have a think, if he does nudge his philosophy just a little bit more this way and that. As you say, you buy Eberechi Eze for these kind of games. Same with Florian Wirtz. Hasn't actually had the best start to his Liverpool career, you'd say, right? But you spent, albeit way more than 70 million, you spent up to 116 million on him. But I'm pleased that Arne Slot did start him because you buy those footballers for these games. And whether it works or not, you're making that statement that you buy an attacking footballers to win these games. So, yeah, I don't know. I think if we just go on to Liverpool very briefly, kind of a really chaotic start to the season. I mean, 4-2 win over Bournemouth with 2 late goals, that crazy game at St James's Park where it was a bit of a smash and grab, really. And then you have that Dominic Szoboszlai free kick. Just on Dominic Szoboszlai, I mean, I was trying to think of examples in the last 24 hours of a player who has switched position. And there's been a collective look at that decision and everyone's thought, wow, that's where you were supposed to play. And I can't think of too many examples, because Dominic Szoboszlai as a right back suddenly just kind of makes sense to me. Liverpool bought Florian Wirtz to play as the number 10, right? You didn't buy him to sit on the bench. So he's playing as the number 10. The Alexis McAllister Gravenberch axis in midfield, that's set in stone, that won you the title, right? So that 3 is set. So then you've got to find a space for Dominic Szoboszlai. And from right back, mate, he was wandering into the midfield like Trent Alexander-Arnold. He was running all over the pitch, had the athleticism of Steven Gerrard. Like, he's taking a free kick like Trent or Gerrard at their best. He's winning duels. He's a big lad. He's 6 foot plus, so he's good at set pieces, like, defensively. And all of a sudden, you're looking at it and you're thinking, wow, like, maybe he's a right back. And it's an odd thing, I guess, to figure that out at 23, 24 years of age, however old he is. But I can't think of too many times I've watched a footballer play out of position and think, wow, that's where you should be. That's where you were born to play. And I thought that about Dominic Szoboszlai on Sunday. Interesting, because I don't think the Liverpool hierarchy thought that, because they bought Frimpong over the summer, and they also have Conor Bradley. So you've got 2 right backs. So this is kind of a new thing, but football does unravel in odd ways. And Dominic Szoboszlai as a right back, I think, is a genuine play for a big portion of the season for Liverpool now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's a guy down in the lower leagues at the EFL that started out his career as a centre forward and is now a centre back. But he's a centre back that wears the number 9. Wears the number 9 shirt still, which I love. That, like, he can't let go of that. And the names just have eluded me for a second here. I know he used to play at like Colchester,
but maybe like Mascherano at Barcelona, wasn't he? He was like a defensive midfielder, and then they used him as like a 5'9" centre back, which is pretty wacky. I mean, there must be other examples, but I can't think of any. I haven't been able to think of any in the last 24 hours.
Desai started out as a centre back and moved into holding midfield as well, which was like a better position for him in Milan, I think. Pirlo dropping in from like an attacking midfield number 10 to actually being a central midfield dictator as well made so much more sense, particularly when, he could just Darmian Diaz walking pace it, I think, as we call it, and pink it about the place.
Darmian Diaz, that's one for the football hipsters. Look it up, folks. I guess Gareth Bale was a left back and went left wing, but these are more finer tweaks, I think, than being he's an 8, but he played last season as a 10. Like off the striker, and even played as a false 9, and then sort of ending up at right back is a different thing entirely.
Didn't Mikel Antonio start as a centre forward and then actually look better as a winger, and then started moving him down the wing instead? But yeah, that's again, it's all similar parts of the field as opposed to anything else. So yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I think you were right in saying it's an erratic start to the league for Liverpool. But this is what just to go back to the comparison with Arsenal. This is what winning silverware gets you. These are suddenly victories, the late win against Bournemouth, the late win against Newcastle, that are called the definition of a champion, of you're just about getting yourself over the line. And 7 goals in the first 2 games still is scoring goals at the end of the day. And if you put yourself in positions where you can score goals, you can work on the defensive unit as you go, in the same way that Arsenal have got a good defensive unit, but you need to work on the position find goals now. But you have that little bit of leeway almost with supporters and with neutrals if you're the reigning champions and you're still winning, even if you're only just winning. I say it wasn't vintage Liverpool at all against Arsenal, partly because they're a very difficult side to break down. But there is that bit of leniency that Arne Slot and Liverpool are going to have this year because of the success they've already had. So it's just something that Arteta and Arsenal are going to have to face. I think you look as well, though, at first game of the season against United. It wasn't like a sterling performance for Arsenal. So everybody came out of that and said that's the worst victory Arsenal have had at Old Trafford in many a year. You're then going to have second game of the season against Leeds, a 5-0 thumping. Everybody goes, oh, great, look, we can score goals. But this is a newly promoted Leeds side under Daniel Farke, who's never quite got it right when he's brought sides up into the Premier League and have always kind of left themselves exposed to being hit for big numbers against good sides in the Premier League. So you've got to take that with a pinch of salt. So at the moment, we've got 2 games where Arsenal aren't looking good against sides that are meant to be very good in the Premier League this season and aren't creating enough chances. And even against Leeds, it was 5 shots on target and 5 goals. I mean, you're not going to get 100% shots on target to goals record every single game. And you might get it against a Leeds or a Burnley or one of the struggling sides down towards the bottom of the table, but you're not going to get it every week and it's not going to be enough to win you a title.
Which would you prefer, Ollie? Alexander Isak for 125 million or a tall fella from the Bundesliga for 70 million and Visser from Brentford for 55 million plus a little bit of change maybe? I mean, which is the better deal? This is an absolute no-brainer, mate.
I know, but if you want to get into like the human side of it, what Isak and Visser have done is not great when you're thinking about building sides around players with the right attitude.
Yeah, that wasn't my question, Ollie. My question was, like, as the trade, for me, 125 million for Alexander Isak is actually kind of decent value, as absurd as it sounds.
Yeah, well, you rate him as a £200 million player, Dave Windsor. So.
I mean, I think probably about a year ago on this pod, I said he was a £100 million player and Ollie nearly had a heart attack. So the fact he's gone for 125, and by the way, I actually think it's decent value when you look at some of the sums of money. Essentially, you have one good year in the Bundesliga and you're a £70 million Premier League player. That seems to be the rate. Like, that's a Sesko, that's a Ekatike, that's a whatever his name is, the 6'10" fella.
It's a joke, is what it is. But yeah, because I don't rate the Bundesliga standard at all. Unless you're doing it for Bayern Munich every single week and in the Champions League, I'm not thinking that you're going to be a great player in the Premier League just because you've done well in the Bundesliga. It's this weird myth around the Bundesliga that, like, up and down the league, it's great talent. It really isn't. It's a pretty average league.
It's a very average league.
It's above Liga. It's below Spain and Italy in terms of the quality, outside of maybe 2 clubs, possibly 3, intermittently, like Leipzig or Leverkusen, in and out every so often. Dortmund sometimes there, Bayern consistent. Like, everything else is just a bit of a mess. I'll probably kiss goodbye working on the Bundesliga ever again because of saying that, but it's how I feel. It's not great.
Well, someone would have to dive into the archives of episode 57, find Ollie's comments.
It's easily done with AI, mate. Search for this. ChatGPT, find Ollie Wilson ranting about topic X. Oh, there we go.
Is there a search engine that means you can do that? If there isn't, there will be soon, right?
There will be soon, for sure. Yeah, this is why podcasting is actually the most dangerous thing you can do. And we're probably some of the bravest people out there in sports journalism telling it like it is.
We're some of the bravest people, full stop, mate, I would have thought. Right, just carrying on in the Premier League. Brighton 2, Man City 1. I wanted to ask you this. Erling Haaland scored for Manchester City. He scored 88 goals in 100 Premier League games. For context, Alan Shearer scored 79 goals in his first 100 Premier League games. Is Erling Haaland actually underrated? 88 goals in his first 100 Premier League games. I mean, the stats are absurd. Bear in mind, by the way, the all-time Premier League goals record is held by Alan Shearer, and he has 260. Now, Haaland's already at 100. You know, he's only been here 2 minutes, it feels like. And if he stays fit the next 5 years, Ollie, then he's going to break that. So, is he actually underrated somehow? Like, he scored 1, by the way. He could have had 3 or 4 at the weekend. Is it the fact that he doesn't look like Thierry Henry, like he doesn't look slick and smooth, that maybe makes people not rate him as much as they should? 88 goals in his first 100 Premier League games. Absurd.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think he is overlooked. I just think that's what happens when you play for a side like Manchester City. I think the fact that you have so much star power around you and you're so expected to score. I mean, look, when he turned up his first season in the Premier League, like, you couldn't avoid a Haaland headline for the first 3 months of the season. The trouble is now he's set a standard for himself that is so high.
Goal a game.
Yeah, if you start like that, people just go, well, this is going to continue. And it's difficult when something becomes the norm to almost break out of looking at that as anything but the norm. Like, Haaland's going to score. Everybody should have him in a Premier League fantasy team. Everybody should put a bet on Haaland scoring every single week, because odds on you'll get your money back, but also you're going to get terrible odds for it because it happens so often. It's just the way it should be. And a Manchester City side are a side that are going to create enough chances that he is going to have 3 clear-cut efforts on goal every single game, and he's taking 1 in 3 easily. I mean, he missed some sitters against Brighton this week. I was half tempted to say, well, he's overrated because he looked poor this weekend in front of goal, because he had 1, but he should have probably had 3. And that result is a very different result to the one that Brighton had. And Haaland and everything, that's great. First and foremost, you should give credit to Brighton for coming back in that game. And, like, that's the kind of resilience, great resilience, that is unbelievable to see at a club like Brighton. When you think about where they've come from as a football club, the ground that they were playing at 15, 20 years ago, and now they're able to take on one of the best sides in the world, go 1-0 down and still have the belief and the resiliency and the tactical ability to still be able to break down a City side, get themselves back into games, and get the Amex absolutely rocking. And it actually felt intimidating for City for a large part of that second half. Amazing. Haaland's not underrated. I think everybody knows how good he is. It's just the way. That's the trouble.
And also, Fabian Hurtzler, right, is 32, which every time I see that, I think is just completely insane. And he's 1-0 down at home to Man City. He makes a quadruple substitution. And I just thought it was quite bold. I know you're 1-0 down, so you maybe got nothing to lose. But it's quite bold, a quadruple substitution. Completely changed the game. A word on James Milner then. I mean, scored his first Premier League goal at 16, I think. And now he's at 39. While we're in the stats mode, by the way, Gareth Barry has the most Premier League appearances, 653. James Milner has 640. So he's 13 off equaling that record. And he's 14 off breaking it, bar an injury. I think he breaks it this season because, he does tend to come off the bench for Brighton. And you know what? I think he turns 40 in a few months, and he could, I reckon, maybe next year he's not with Brighton, Ollie, but I'm sure a newly promoted club next year will give him another go, and then he could sort of nudge 10, 15, 20 appearances above Gareth Barry, because there's just no stopping him. And it was a great pen as well, by the way.
Yeah, great pen. And what was it, like 3 years since his last Premier League goal, which is, it doesn't necessarily fill the football fan if you got told that just before he takes it, as we had on the commentary of Match of the Day of, it's been 3 years since his last goal, and you've got James Milner stepping up to take this penalty to get you back level against Manchester City. You wouldn't go, oh, he's going to score then. Like, not a guarantee, but yeah, very good penalty. And more importantly, just, I don't know the man personally, but you don't really hear much about James Milner, which is always nice. In this day and age of football, obviously he's come through the pre-social media kind of generation of footballers and then lived through it all and is in the midst of it now, probably in the latter part of his career where he's old enough and smart enough to go, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot barge pole. But
7 years older than his manager.
Yeah, that's...
It's just insane, isn't it?
I always wonder how those relationships work as well on like a training ground.
Humility, I think. The only way that can work is someone like James Milner has a great deal of humility and says, okay, this guy didn't play at the level I did. He's 7 years younger, but I'm going to listen to him because he's the boss, and I'm going to trust him, and I'm going to do what he says. Otherwise, it can't work. And
he needs to show early on that he's got a good tactical brain for football. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's very easy for someone like Milner, who's been led by some great managers in his career, to go, lads, I'm not sure this is the right guy. Like, you have, as you say, you have to park that ego very quickly as a leader in the dressing room to make sure that the manager is given first and foremost the ability to lead, and then you and everybody else follow. When a lot of young players in that Brighton side will probably look at James Milner for advice and, how does this kind of compare to what you've been through in the past and everything? So,
on Manchester City, just finally, one thing I also thought, Ollie, as covering this game, right? And City have bought a lot of players like Omar Marmoush, Oscar Bob, Doku, Reinders. Good footballers. But in this transitional period under Guardiola, they haven't gone out and bought an Isak. They haven't gone out and bought, like Haaland was kind of before this iteration, this transitional period. So he's bought a lot of players that might end up being great, like Marmoush, Doku, as I say, like Reinders. I mean, they're good football. They look good, right? But there hasn't been like the statement signing. Like there hasn't been the Florian Wirtz, the Isak. And maybe it works out, but it doesn't feel like any of those are going to tear up the Premier League.
Well, again, because some of them have come from, mid-level German football and around the continent, and because they're not splashy, I always have that question mark of, is this actually a City caliber player? I mean, you look at someone like a Jack Grealish, a Riyad Mahrez, they were great at Leicester and at Aston Villa, but when it came to it, like they were good for City, but it was other key big name players around them that elevated them. And you look at that City starting 11, obviously it's great for having Rodri back and Bernardo Silva. Reinders is going to benefit so much more from those two and what they do compared to what he had around him, for instance, at Milan. Like Reinders,
he's okay, Reinders, mate. He's not winning them the league, is he?
Yeah, no, that's what I said after the first game of the season. I was like, he's a really good player who will be elevated by what City have, but he's not the guy that you bring in to be the next Bernardo Silva for this side. So, and then obviously like an Oscar Bob and a Marmoush, they just need to provide for Haaland, and they'll look good if Haaland's scoring. But would I be looking at, say, Manchester United if they signed a Marmoush and went, oh yeah, that's the guy that's going to start turning around the fortunes at Manchester United? I don't think I would. I'd be going, oh yeah, that's another like good signing that hopefully can be meshed into a team. So now Pep has to work out who those key players are in that side. Obviously, he's kept a number of them about still because he recognises he needs those guys still. And he needs to start finding a way to take the pressure off people like a Marmoush while also getting them involved more almost. If you get what I mean? Like, it's not reliant on you being the man, but what it is it relies on you doing your small jobs while the men in this side go about their business.
Before we talk about Man United, just want to touch on Jack Grealish. I mean,
Great.
He's got 4 assists in 2 games, Ollie. Most assists ever in a Premier League season. Kevin De Bruyne and Thierry Henry both got 20. I mean, 16 off that now. It's incredible, really, what Jack Grealish has done. Although, is it? Because he's a quality footballer. And if you put the arm around the shoulder and you make him the main man, then he becomes that. We saw that Aston Villa. And I wonder if a couple of clubs, Ollie, I wonder if Tottenham are looking at it and thinking, God, I mean, we could have been in for him. There's a few, and not just them, by the way, like Man United. I mean, there's a few that just, could we not have swallowed his wages for a year and played him out left or in the number 10 position and told him he was the man, everything was going to go through him? He's only 29 or 30 maybe. So, yeah, I mean, Everton have got a great deal there. And I mean, there's been some talk as well about how he didn't want to move out like the area. And obviously Manchester, Liverpool's really close. So maybe he stays in the same house and, I think he's got kids or whatever. So there's that as well. But yeah.
You're also, right now, you're working with a very good talent in Jack Grealish that I don't necessarily think is like the wonder kid or, he's not going to be the guy for a great side, for instance, like a Real Madrid or anybody like that. But you're dealing with a guy that certainly has the ability to play at one of those big sides while he's on loan. And that means he's still got hunger to show that he's the man. I think if he was on a permanent move at Everton right now, it could be a very different Jack Grealish. I don't know. It's hypothetical, obviously. But that carrot on the stick, I mean, I'll always bring the example of Romelu Lukaku when he was at Chelsea and loaned out to West Bromwich Albion. And Lukaku was one of the best strikers in the Premier League at West Brom and was so hungry to show everybody that I can dominate and be the guy at this level and in this Premier League against great sides, I can do this and bring this sort of form back to a Chelsea and elevate your front line. And it never materialised because it just wasn't quite that guy at Chelsea, and obviously he's been great everywhere else and a number of places around Europe and Italy especially. But yeah, I do think that the carrot on the stick of it's only a loan deal. If everything goes well, imagine we might need you, Jack, at some point if we can bring you back in. If he does get 20 assists this season or more, like, do you think Man City will look and go, oh, actually, Grealish instead of Marmoush out on the left might work for us? 100% Pep Guardiola. You'd have to be crazy not to. So I think that's an important part of it. But he's
going to be in demand next summer. That's for sure. Look, if he wasn't the summer just gone, he's going to be in demand next summer, either for City to bring him back or he's running down his contract now, right? So either someone will think, yeah, okay, he's 30, but he's Jack Grealish. Maybe we can spend 20, 30 million on him.
And you've got as well a very talented front line there and a centre forward in Betu who you saw it in Italy and it's starting to happen more at the start of this season of his ability to bring others into play, hold up the ball, but also has that great strength to break in behind with a purposeful run down the centre.
Doesn't score many goals.
No, but that I think is going to change with what the supporting cast now, with a Grealish providing for him and Dye on the other side and Dewsbury Hall down the centre. I think that's a great little servicing three.
Dibbling as well from Southampton is a lovely little footballer. So
yeah, it's a positive sign for Everton, and Grealish is going to have to be a big cog in the wheel, obviously, but it's a great start to his time there for sure.
Time to talk Manchester United.
First Everton player with 2 assists in his first 2 games for the club in the club's history, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that was a stat that I saw the other week.
Stat man. Let's talk Man United. I mean, one pot a week's not enough to cover the circus that is Ruben Amorim and Manchester United.
I think it's great he's playing Sabutio during the Carabao Cup. He doesn't care. He's got like that. It's not proper Sabutio. It's that rubbish one that came out when we were young where it's like magnetic on the field and you press the button down and it fires the ball. But I think that's nice. He's having a bit of time just playing with his Christmas present or something. That's great.
So I'm going to bring back a phrase that was nudged out of the English language in recent years. Ruben Amorim, just man up, mate. Like, watch the fucking penalties. At Grimsby, he can't even watch the penalty. Like, he can't watch the penalty shootout. Like, Bruno Fernandes, like, he can't even watch him. Like, mate, you're manager of Manchester United Football Club. Like, just watch the fucking penalties. Your players are brave enough to take them, so be brave enough to watch them. Otherwise, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing in charge of Man United Football Club? Like, if you can't watch the fucking penalties, honestly, just go home. Like, it's a joke that you can't watch them. Like, people already think you're not a very good football manager. You're just like a pretty man on the touchline that doesn't have a clue. And it's not going to help if you don't have the balls to watch your team fail, essentially, and take penalties. I didn't understand that at all. It was absolutely ludicrous. And then like, he comes out in the press conference and, I mean, look, he gives an honest answer to an honest question. He says he hates his players sometimes, he loves them, and he hates his job and he loves his job. But all that people outside the club think is like, wow, you are an erratic human being. And what Man United need right now is consistency. Look, they got that late goal against Burnley, didn't they, at the weekend? So he kind of lives to fight another day. But if they didn't get that goal, mate, I mean, he's in big trouble. So, yeah, fascinating.
I just don't. I don't think.
Are you done with him?
I just don't think
he's it.
Nothing. I've given him as long a leash as anybody's given him, and the start to this season was always going to be important. And it's so uninspiring. I don't really begrudge him for the not looking at penalties like different managers I've seen. You see loads of managers not willing to look, and loads of players not willing to look. So,
mate, do any top managers not look at the penalty shoot? Do you think Mourinho hid away from watching penalties?
I think
Pep Guardiola.
I think Jose has.
Do you think Carlo Ancelotti, mate, hid behind, like, doesn't have the balls to watch a penalty shootout? Like, behave, man. The top managers watch their teams take penalties.
Well, I always think that doing stuff like that is actually kind of narcissistic, because you know that if you're not watching, a camera is going to find you and have the shot of you not watching, and it suddenly becomes about you. Now, whether that's like a protection thing in the moment for the players, I don't know, or whether he genuinely can't watch it. Maybe that's the case, and maybe you do need to have a bit more cojones. But like, I don't care either way whether you watch it or not, because you can't do anything as a manager at that point, and like the fate is very much in the hands of the players, as it always is when it's out on the field anyway.
Is it a superstitious thing? Because if it is, it didn't work. Like, if it was superstitious not to watch them against Grimsby, then you should be watching every penalty ever taken afterwards, because it didn't work. You're mad superstition.
But watching those penalties is... He literally can't do anything. So it doesn't matter whether you watch him or not. So if he's like, I just can't bring myself to watch it, then fine, don't watch it. Because you have to watch the game, because you're the manager on the touchline who's meant to be able to watch, see tactically what's going on, see what's working, see what isn't. Quite a lot, it seems, under Amorim. But you can't watch a penalty shootout and be like tactically, oh yeah, maybe you shouldn't have blasted it 10
No,
yards
but
over
you
the
can
bar.
be
Bruno.
a reflection and an embodiment of your team. So if you're there, hiding away, refusing to watch them, and the next penalty taker has a look across at the boss and is like, blimey, boss isn't even watching this. Like, is that going to fill you with confidence? I don't know.
It's more embarrassing against Grimsby in the second round of the Carabao Cup, where it's like, he can't watch
This ain't
this.
a Champions League semi-final.
Yeah, he can't watch this. This doesn't really mean anything to us at this point, aside from like a fair bit of humiliation if we go out. But like, this is going to be bigger fish to fry. No, I do get what you're saying. I don't care for it too much. He was kind of watching, kind of not. I think he was staring into the distance, wondering where he's going to move after he has to leave Manchester if they'd lost that game against Burnley. So that might be more what was going through his mind. I mean, it's going to be it should have been a great meme inside 24 hours of him, and then like a thought bubble coming out as he was gazing into the distance watching it. But yeah, United aren't the United. Amorim doesn't feel like the man to raise them from the trenches that they're in right now. So,
but he did kind of feel like the man.
No, he didn't, because he was forced into it. And I think the kind of being forced into that job when you maybe weren't ready, and then you go through the season that they had last year, like, doesn't fill you with confidence. If Amorim had a great season with Sporting last season, particularly after beating Manchester City in the Champions League, it's a great feather in the cap. You then go and compete for another Portuguese title maybe, and then you've agreed with United, I'm going to come in as soon as the season finishes and we're going to walk in. He can start planning without having to deal with the United crap that comes on the side, which he had to deal with last season because he was put in the job way too early and earlier than he wanted to be. So we kind of said last season that last year should be a free hit. But unfortunately for Ruben Amorim, it may have hit him and his confidence and his ability to work things out at Manchester United because he's too close to the fire, so to speak, and has already been burnt, rather than having that free hit of last season doesn't matter, this is the year you have to get it right. And it looks like maybe some of the fire has kind of swept over the summer and is still burning well and true at United, despite the new training ground and everything that's been said over the last few months.
Paquetá saves Potter. Big win for West Ham, that. I think Graham Potter would have been in big trouble had they not won that. And Paquetá, I mean, probably celebration of the season, even only 3 games into the season, Ollie. If anyone hasn't seen it or hasn't watched Match of the Day, basically Paquetá was strongly linked with Aston Villa the last few days, and Paquetá scores, and he does a celebration of like hanging up on someone essentially. So he's got the phone, he's got the hand to his face, mimicking a phone call, slams it down, and then he kisses the badge. So,
firstly, Paquetá's young enough that he should have been doing the square hand to the face, and he didn't. He did the thumb and the finger, didn't he?
Yeah, he did thumb.
Yeah.
But how long goes the square hand to the face?
Well, because like kids have never seen a phone that looks like the shape of the thumb and the finger. So even though it's the more common gesture, whereas kids have only seen a mobile phone, a flat screen.
So do they do that now, kids? They have the hand to the...
Well, I don't think they even take phone calls, kids these days. They only do WhatsApp messages and text messages and stuff like that, or they post Snapchats and whatever. So
do you still ring mates up for a chat?
Yeah, definitely. And it really...
Solid.
And there are people that I know that won't answer phone calls from phone numbers they don't recognise or have in their phone. And I'm like, you're an adult. You can take a phone call. I take every phone call because I don't know if it's going to be work or not, and that's the freelance life that we live in. It's like, what's this number?
Can you cover the snowplow Olympics in Azerbaijan next week?
Boom, done. Yeah, Tottenham Hotspur's under 18s, definitely. We're on it. Don't worry about it. All good. Whereas, yes, but kids should be doing the flat palm to the face because that's the phone they've seen. Now, the best thing about this is that he does this before the Villa loss to Crystal Palace, but I would have also kind of preferred if he suddenly made this big grand gesture, considering he's heavily linked with Villa, after Villa have been pasted by Palace and been like, I ain't going there. They're shit. This is rubbish. Nowhere am I going there. I'll stick around here in London at least.
Someone said recently that listens to the pod, Ollie, they were like, you're the only podcast I listen to that there isn't like a producer. So it's obvious you guys edit it because it's... Yeah, because like loads of other pods like send their podcast off to some producer, not here, not another sports pod. It is nuts and bolts.
We barely edit it.
There was a sneaky... I can't criticise Ollie at all because he's held the fort the last month while I put out 0 social media clips, but there was a sneaky audio thing 24 minutes into last week's pod. Check it out, Ollie, if you're not... if you might have missed it. It was a funny thing, yeah. All good, nothing that's going to see us cancelled. Right, elsewhere in the Premier League. That probably wraps it up, to be honest. In other football stories, before we talk about golf and tennis, maybe, did want to just talk about the England squad briefly. First of all, the September international break, as I said before, I don't think it should exist because the Premier League's just picking up a little bit of momentum, and suddenly you have this 10-day international break, or 2-week international break, really. And I wonder whether it would be possible in future years, Ollie, to take this September, October, November international break and maybe merge it into like a late October, early November, where you play those 6 games in like a 3-week period. That's sort of like a mini break for some clubs, because not everyone is an international footballer. Some aren't. So I wonder if there's a way. And I don't think it would be detrimental to anyone. Like, those games will still get played. There'd still be 6 international games played before Christmas, but they're just putting the same thing. Because otherwise, it doesn't actually matter that much for European-based players. But for the South Americans, mate, they go to South America once in September, once in October, once in November. It's pretty hefty, that. So I think in the future, if you're looking to clean up the fixture list without getting rid of games, that's something that could get looked upon.
And maybe you allow a slightly expanded squad for the international teams as well, so they can take a few extra players just in case. Also allows more rotation, so people aren't getting completely overrun, etc. I mean, the Serie A season's 2 weeks in, and we're in an international break, and it's like, we just got going, guys. Like, we suddenly have to stop. I mean, thankfully the Premier League's been going a week or so longer, but it does feel like this weird kind of, hey, football's back. Pause it. Wait a second, you're having too much fun. We're going to VAR check everything that's gone on in the first few weeks, and we'll come back after this break. It's like, oh, yeah, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, the September one, I think, specifically really, really irks. Just on the England squad, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about England, but Marcus Rashford in, Jordan Henderson in, Jack Grealish not in, Trent Alexander-Arnold not in. Don't know. Like, I haven't watched Rashford at Barcelona, so I don't know, but I don't think he's scored a goal for them yet. Jordan Henderson apparently has been doing pretty well. Is it Burnley he's playing for, or Brentford? Brentford, yeah. Apparently he's done quite well. I haven't really seen him, but he's in the squad, so Tuchel, I mean, he likes him. Jack Grealish, unlucky not to get in for me. Unlucky not to get in. He's Jack Grealish. He's had a great start to his Everton career. You know what he can do. I think that's unlucky. And then Trent Alexander-Arnold, look, I know he got dropped by Real Madrid the other day and Carvajal started, but he actually played at the weekend and looked fantastic for Real Madrid. So, I don't know. I think I'm a massive fan, Ollie, of including like unique footballers, and I think Jack Grealish and Trent Alexander-Arnold, for all their flaws, are quite unique players, and so I'm surprised at that.
Well, and considering what we've seen from Grealish at the start of this season, like, I mean, you've seen a player suddenly completely refine his form, his passion, his energy levels. That's one that really does stick out because he's been a standout player across the Premier League at the start of this campaign. I mean, you run down this international side, and look, there's some, like, obviously stalwarts, great experience, you know, Pickford, Stones, etc. Henderson brought in, I think, to be like, I think they call it the vibes man. You know, just that level-headed experience, central midfield. Because outside of that, the oldest player is Declan Rice at 26 in that midfield group, and then everything else is 25 or under and not really played much international football at all. So you actually kind of need a Henderson along with a Rice maybe to have just that old head stability in that sense. I look at this England squad and I don't think it reeks of quality. I wouldn't look at that, and obviously there's going to be changes over time, but I wouldn't look at this and go, that's a side that's going to compete for a World Cup. Like, it doesn't look like it to me. But, you know, Tuchel's got a long time. He's going to throw in curveballs. He's only got 12 months at it, really. So let's ride
He can piss people off. That's the benefit of the short contract, right? He doesn't need to build a relationship that's going to last 10 years with anyone.
Let's ride the Thomas Tuchel ride and see where it all falls off inevitably at some point. But yeah,
not at some point, Ollie, in a semi-final against a footballing side that just takes a deep breath and decides they can just play around us.
You'd take a semi-final as an England fan. You'd still take a semi-final.
What are you talking about? No way, mate.
That'd be considered still a success. We're about to.
How would it when Gareth Southgate lost 2 finals and he's not considered a success?
He's getting knighted, isn't he?
Yeah, he got knighted, but the vast majority of people wouldn't say it was a success.
Sir Gareth Southgate begs to differ, I think.
All fair.
I just quickly,
other football on the continent. I know Ollie covered some Italian football this week, so maybe you want to chat about that, mate.
Yeah, not a huge amount to get into. Inter were upset on the weekend, which was interesting. Cremonese, who signed Jamie Vardy, which is a fantastic move. I mean, There's talk about Kevin De Bruyne going to Naples this season, obviously, and he's had a great start to the campaign with them. And they've gone 2 for 2 to start the season in Italian football as they defend the Scudetto. And like, there's been a lot of jokes about De Bruyne got a bit chunky anyway towards leaving Manchester City, and it's like De Bruyne has only moved to Naples for the pasta. He's going to get super fat. He's going to be on the pizza and pasta all day long. I could see Jamie Vardy doing the same thing. You know, he's achieved more than he could ever have dreamed of in his career. And now he gets to go and live it up in Italy with Cremonese, where the idea is to keep him safe in Serie A. It's just a wonderful move.
Just to give some context, presumably they're fighting relegation this year, or what?
They'll be battling down towards the bottom of the table. So
and he's 38, nearly 39.
But in that league, with a bit of power and a bit of persistence, and Vardy's got that in droves, like, it could work out. You know, it could be 15, 20 goals this season for them, and might be what potentially keeps them up, because there are probably going to be worse sides out there, but we'd have to see. I just wanted to draw attention to a couple of things. This weird thing with Tottenham signed Kolo Muani this afternoon from Paris Saint-Germain, a deal that, considering Tottenham were complaining about hijacking the Arsenal Eze deal being hijacked away from them, they've done the exact same thing, from the sounds of it, to Juventus, because Juventus apparently had this signed, sealed, delivered, and Tottenham have come in at the last minute and nicked him away from Paris Saint-Germain to join the North London club, which is a fair enough move. Juve, aren't guaranteed to be fighting for a Scudetto at the moment. What they do have is Dusan Vlahovic, who has been waiting on the whole summer to be kicked out of Juventus, costing them too much money, not enough of a goal return. And he scored on the opening day of the season to seal a 2-0 victory against a Parma side that's meant to struggle. And then he came off the bench against Genoa and scored again off the bench for Juventus to get the only goal of the game in a poor game against Genoa. And I think, Comelli, the GM at Juventus, came out last week and said 99% Vlahovic is staying. And I think Juve have kind of got to take this now and go, look, he might actually be our best striker still, because we've got Jonathan David, who's just come in, who's getting ready to hopefully be their lead forward, but no guarantees joining a new league whether it's going to be perfect or not. And Vlahovic is a great forward. I mean, you've seen a lot of him. He could have gone to so many places and fitted in so many sides. It's just that Juventus don't really play that counter-attacking football, which he loves, with space in front of him. But he's still a great threat in the air as well, as we saw this weekend.
I was really surprised when I just checked his age, Ollie, and he's only 25. Like, I thought he was older, because I feel like he's been around forever. And when I covered Serie A, I loved him. And because he moved in 2021-22, he moved in that January window, didn't he, from Fiorentina to Juventus. And he scored 20 in 24 games for Fiorentina. And then he went to Juve and he was like 1-2. And he started really well. And if you think of all the strikers, Ollie, that the Premier League have taken a punt on in the last 2 or 3 years, and apparently he always gets offered up to Premier League clubs, for no one to go in for him, I think, is really, really curious, to be honest with you. Because 25, like, there's some sell-on value, like if you have him for a couple of years and it doesn't quite work. But maybe the physicality people don't think would work, but I don't know, man. These days the Premier League's not that physical, so I'm surprised that no Premier League club's taken a
I think we've
punt on him.
realised this weekend with Fulham-Chelsea that the Premier League isn't physical at all. I mean, I loved Jonathan Pearce saying, let's just get rid of all contact. Let's just get rid of all contact. And that went out on Match of the Day, and it was like, it summed up the frustration that every football fan has now with what the Premier League's becoming. But yeah, Vlahovic is going to be sticking around at Juve, and they're going to rely on him, and they're going to need him to try and... But 2 for 2 as well to start the season, Juventus, without conceding. But there was this great moment. Genoa, the Luigi Ferrari Stadium in Genoa that's shared between Genoa and Sampdoria. Sampdoria down in Serie C now, which is such a shame. Still one of the best football shirts in the world. And they've brought out another banger this year for their season in the 3rd tier. But they share this very iconic ground, which you kind of have to half glance at it, because it's got this beautiful red bricking in each corner that kind of takes up where normally most grounds would have ripped that out, put a curve in each corner and filled in the corners, but they don't. It's just 4 sides basically. And every so often you kind of think, is that a block of flats just stuck in the corner? Because there's little windows obviously where people can walk up the inside of it and go out onto the terrace. And it's a great football stadium. It's only about 34,000, and the whole place before the Juve game was packed. And we came on air and they started doing the kind of stadium shots that you always get before the teams kind of walk out. And they were singing You'll Never Walk Alone. And I haven't worked out why Genoa have adopted You'll Never Walk Alone for them. And I wonder if it's anything to do with the tragic bridge collapse that happened a few years ago. And if it's kind of a song that basically just sums up how the city has come together and how the football club, which I think did quite a lot in terms of the relief effort have kind of come together. I'm not 100% sure
Mate,
on that.
I know this from my time covering Serie A. So there's a big connection between Genoa and Liverpool as cities. And I believe, I'm looking it up now, there's something about the Beatles. I believe the first gig they ever played outside England was at Genoa. There's some, obviously they're both like historic port cities, but there's definitely like a stronger connection that I can't quite remember. And I'm asking ChatGPT now, but there's something like the Beatles played. Yeah, they played their first gig outside England in Genoa or something like that.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway,
so they're
yeah.
singing You'll Never Walk Alone in this packed out, because it's the second game of the season, obviously, so hopes are still high that Genoa aren't going to have a terrible year this year and be fighting relegation. And you know when you can just let a football game breathe during it? This was, I let the full kind of 8 minutes of the intro of the game before the teams walked out basically just sit and breathe, because it was a football stadium where there was no pre-match music or anything like that before teams came out, and it was just fans and the colour and the scarves and the flags. And if you can go back and find any footage of it from this weekend, it's one of those ones where you get a little tingle down your spine, and that's what football's about. We've been bemoaning things like VAR and United are bad and Arsenal are bad, and we've found so many negativities this week. And actually, the football fans and the atmosphere that's created is still one of the best things about this sport, and that's why players get up in big games when there's that sort of atmosphere. And it highlights as well what's happening, the kind of fallout with the Milan trying to clamp down and suppress the ultras on the Curva Sud as well, which is why they've had protests from the ultras at Milan already at the start of this season, and there could be more games where the Curva, nobody's on it, which would be an absolute tragedy because it kills the atmosphere suddenly at one of the great stadiums, San Siro. And as they try to clean up football and remove the kind of nastiness, particularly that we saw during the 90s with ultras in Italy. Yeah, you do want to make football a safe environment to go to and a place where everybody feels welcome. But you do need, to some extent, have that relationship with those ardent supporters that create that noise and atmosphere, because it's such a big sell, particularly if you're not the Premier League and you're trying to sell your league on something. It's still the best, an Italian football atmosphere when it's like that. It was unbelievable.
Before we go on to golf, breaking news. Liverpool have agreed a deal to sign England centre-back Mark Gay from Crystal Palace. Generational transfer window.
Yeah,
An absolute... Mate, they'll be talking about this transfer window from Liverpool in 5 years' time as something that was just unheard of.
It's the Van Dijk Alisson, but potentially 3 players instead of 2 kind of thing, isn't it?
I mean, like, Isak and Wirtz, like, those are 2. You are starting. You're going to be there for the next 5 years. That's your number 9. That's your number 10. Or he's 7, but you take my point. And then to sign Mark Gay, what you're doing is you're saying, Konate's out of contract next summer. He's going to leave. Virgil van Dijk is 34. He's not getting any younger. You're presumably saying you're the guy, Mark Gay. You're 25 years of age. You're the guy that's going to lead our defence for the years to come. So, yeah, it's a real big one. It wouldn't surprise me, Ollie, if Liverpool don't do any business, by the way, in the next 2 or 3 windows.
You couldn't have signed 2 more different approaches to the interest that Liverpool have had in Isak and Gay as well. In terms of the performance that he had on the weekend against Villa, Gay was just leader by example. And hasn't raised his voice, really. Has been like, yeah, I'd love a move somewhere like that. That'd be great. But I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to work hard. That's the difference between defenders and strikers, isn't it? That is the difference. Defenders are like all about the team camaraderie, working together to shut out opposition. And strikers are like, I want the ball. Let me score goals. I mean, that's it. But yeah, that's a great move. Great move for Liverpool.
Golf. Well, just finally on that, I do feel a bit for Crystal Palace, because this is potentially like the biggest season in their history. Oliver Glasner is a fantastic manager. You win the FA Cup, then you win the Community Shield, then you're playing in the Conference League. You're playing in a competition where you're favourite to win it. And if it had just kept Eza and Gay for one more year, they might have gone on and won that, and then you got a European trophy, and then you're in the Europa League, and then like magical things can happen. So, look, they're a selling club, and clubs get stripped of their assets, whether you're Liverpool and they go to Real Madrid, or you're Crystal Palace and they go to Liverpool. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Glasner will be absolutely fuming with that. I don't see him at Crystal Palace much longer. I really don't, because the last interview I heard from him, he was like, "We're not selling Gay. We can't sell Gay. No way we're selling Mark Gay."
Yeah, can't get rid of these guys. Oh, they've gone. And he even on Match Today, he was like, we need to keep these guys around. I've said to the chairman, I've said to everybody, we need to keep good players, otherwise we don't go any further. And when you're selling them late in a window, that's the killer. Because you haven't got time. You're scrambling now if you're Palace. Like, what the hell do we do? We've had 7 days to try and find an Eza replacement. We've got a few hours now to find a Gay replacement. So,
I'm not going to talk about tennis, Ollie, because I'll wait till next Monday after the men's final. We can have a chit-chat and a review of the US Open. So, golf, my friend. The floor is yours.
Well, we've had the picks. The picks are in, to quote every NFL draft night for the last however many years. For the Ryder Cup, obviously coming in late September, Team Europe against Team USA. Last Wednesday, we had the USA making their picks with a few raised eyebrows. The big one being that Keegan Bradley, who has been one of the 12 best golfers in the world this year of American heritage, didn't pick himself to be a playing captain for Team USA, which everybody thought it was going to happen. The way he's been kind of feeding the media a little bit. You guys are going to be surprised. Oh, there's going to be some shocks. There's been some real tough decisions that I've had to make.
Trump wanted him to as well, right?
I think everybody wanted him to. One of the sad things was a lot of people wanted him to for content rather than playing ability. But I had to get to the bottom of this because I was trying to work out why on earth like being a playing captain would have been such a disastrous idea. I mean, it's something that Team Europe throughout this whole thing, Rory McIlroy came out with some comments of like, no, I'd never do it. Like it was approached to me in the past about being a playing captain. I said I'd never do it. It's not something that I think works, etc. So I reached out to, I wouldn't say friend of the show because he does other podcasts around the place, but I reached out to the BBC's lead chief golf reporter, Mr. Ian Carter, asking him why would being a playing captain be such a disastrous thing? And he said, I think it would be possible to play and be a captain, but impossible to do either role well. In the practice days, you've got to know who in your team is going well. So the few days leading up to the Ryder Cup and who's not. On actual days of competition, you have to have your afternoon pairings for the afternoon sessions of foursome and four balls in by noon. Now, if you're out on the golf course playing, it's very difficult to make those picks by noon and know what's happened elsewhere around the golf course that morning to then be able to make the judgment of how those pairings should line up. Because things will change. You know, if somebody goes out and has an absolute disastrous morning and they were originally like, I'm going to have him in my afternoon session as well, you might need to change something up. And if you haven't seen it, you can't really react to that. If you decide not to play in the morning, you are limiting your own options. In between all of this, there are speeches, media commitments that set the tone for your week and day. Somewhere in there, you have to be concentrating on your own game as well. Everything is in danger of being over-compromised and you face unprecedented scrutiny. He's made the right decision, in my opinion. So that was interesting because I was...
That's an exclusive, by the way. Not another Sports Pod's first ever exclusive.
Yeah, it might be one of the more boring ones that you could probably have as well. I mean, I really appreciated Ian because he typed that. I sent him a voice message because I'm a lazy slob, and he typed all of that out to me, which shows the true professional journalist that he actually is. But that was interesting because I was trying to work out this kind of captain's conundrum because I was just thinking, yeah, you could captain. Like, you already make your afternoon picks beforehand or like just beforehand or whatever, and that'll all be fine. And no, you do have to see what's going on and know what's going on all around the course, and that takes you out of your own game and all the other responsibilities as well. Colin Morikawa, there was a bit of kind of should he be playing or not for Team USA, but he's been given the nod. There weren't really too many big shocks. It kind of went how it should do. There's just a few guys that don't have much Ryder Cup experience in Team USA. That's bad to overlook that because the guys that have been selected have had good years on the PGA. You have to have had a good year on the PGA to be in there. So I think it's worrying to overlook Team USA. And then this afternoon, Luke Donald for Team Europe has made his picks. It all finished just before we came on the podcast. And for Team Europe, there's no real surprises. It's the same team.
BBC have gone with Europe named least changed Ryder Cup team in history.
Yeah, it's the same, basically. So for the picks, the big one for Luke Donald really was Matt Fitzpatrick and whether he was going to stick with Fitzpatrick, who hasn't played well this year. Ludwig Orber as well has had injuries and actually been quite poor in the latter part of the year. But you knew it was going to be Shane Lowry, who's also had a bad 6 to 8 months. But he only just missed out on an automatic spot because the top 6 in the world rankings for Team Europe get automatic spots going into the Ryder Cup team. So the captain makes 6 optional picks, basically. You knew that John Rahm was going to get it. He's had a very good year on Live. He's also done pretty well in the majors, was in contention for the US Open. Sepp Straka just missed out on an automatic spot, was going to be taken. Victor Hovland had the biggest win in Ryder Cup history last time out in Marco Simone. He was going to go. Ludwig had that win with Hovland, so he was always going to go. And then, it was Matt Fitzpatrick. There were a few. Harry Hall has been kind of portrayed as this anti-Bryson because he started wearing like the Bryson Kangol cap, but he's also the complete opposite. He's not a huge hitter and he's a great putter with great short game. And he was right in there potentially for a kind of a rogue pick. But it's kind of uninteresting in that he's gone with Matt Fitzpatrick, someone who's got experience, only 1 point in his last 3 Ryder Cup matches, which isn't great reading for Matt Fitzpatrick. So, I would just wait and see what happens. Everybody seems to think that Team Europe, because they're bringing the same group back, it's kind of this, the experienced Team Europe now. They were the kind of inexperienced underdogs last year. These guys have all got another year on them and they're going to whoop the USA at Bethpage Black. I just don't see that happening. I think USA want to defend home territory. And I think you overlook golfers at your peril, because as soon as you think somebody's done, that's when almost the pressure is off their shoulders and they start playing freer golf. I think that's been a big reason why Keegan Bradley's actually played so well this year, because making a Ryder Cup team was always such a big thing for Keegan Bradley. He just missed out on going to Marco Simone last time. And then this time, because he's been the captain, he knows he's going and not expected to play because you don't have playing captains. The interesting thing is that might have actually freed up his golf game this year, where he's put himself in a position where he could have been a playing captain and has decided against it. But the picks are in for both teams now, and now we just sit back and wait until the end of September while the man cave gets built, and wait for that to be christened with the opening weekend for the Ryder Cup.
So it's happening in September?
It's being built now as we speak.
How big a TV are you going to get in there?
We'll come to that when we
because you'll need a massive TV, right? Yeah.
But it's not going to be an expensive one. I'm going for we're not kitting this out with really nice stuff. I just want a good sized TV and the ability to watch sport and do work in there. That's the main thing.
I mean, what else do you need, really?
That's my life. What else do you need?
But I mean, as long as it's warm in there and you got all your kit, then you're fine.
And a good backdrop, obviously, for the podcast. That's the main thing.
Crucial, man. Crucial.
Any other business, Windsor?
Don't think so. You?
No, I don't think so. Oh, F1 started this weekend again. We had the big break, and it's all gone kaput very briefly for Lando Norris, unfortunately. His car caught fire at Zandvoort in the closing laps. It's basically going to be the two McLarens fighting out for the Drivers' World Championship. Their car's just above everybody else right now. And Piastri and Norris first and second, separated by about a second in the closing laps of Zandvoort. And something happened with Norris's McLaren. Catches smoke's coming out the back of it and has to pull over and retire from the race. It's a huge blow. And I think Lando Norris now has to just go balls to the wall, Max Verstappen-esque driving to have a chance of basically knocking Piastri off the top of the Drivers' Championship. But credit to Isaac Hadjar, the first podium for him in his F1 career because of Norris dropping out and Hadjar taking third spot, which is sensational.
I sent Ollie a article this week that I was sure was going to be met with enthusiasm and actually was met by a bit of a meh, which is BBC have got an article at the moment, which is a fella has achieved his ultimate dream of 24 Formula One races on a 20 grand budget and with just 28 days holiday from his job. So presumably he's just jetting off every weekend that he can to do this. And Ollie, you weren't very impressed by this.
I don't think it's worth it. Of all of the
but if he's a massive F1 fan and he's I don't know, a single guy and he's obviously got 20 grand to burn, why not? Once in a lifetime, no?
I think spending 4-5 grand trips on F1 and getting the best ticket in the house is better than 20 grand or single.
And just do
grand.
that gradually throughout his life, so he experiences each of them at its absolute peak.
Because you're paying obviously for the lowest ticket, which actually is going to limit how much of the action you'll be able to see. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing if that's all you can kind of do to go to F1. That's all I can afford to go to the Formula One, and it's still a great experience. But I think if you've got a spare 20 grand, that you can use on something like this, I think it's better to go and do 4 like big ones. Like Hungary's meant to be the cheapest Grand Prix that you can go to, and I reckon if you dropped $4,000 on a ticket at Hungary, they might let you drive the car out in Budapest. I mean, that's getting up close to it, and all of that kind of stuff would be way cooler than just being like, I went to every single one and stood behind a barrier at Singapore.
Yeah, now you're talking a sort of, like, for example, mate, he did the one in Japan. Japan was literally a long weekend in Japan. So he did Japan for a long weekend. It's like, that's brutal, mate. You're at the back of the plane. You get to Japan, okay, like, I get it. You get the nice snap. But, like, you're destroyed. Your sleeping pattern's destroyed. As I speak, one of the most iconic Ollie Wilson moments of all time is being in RG. And Ollie Wilson, the week before, had literally flown to Japan for 3 days of work, or 2 days of work, had flown back to the UK. Then a few days later, he flew to RG. And then we were sat there on a Friday night after a week's work in RG, and Ollie Wilson was still going strong. So, yeah, what am I talking about?
I also did the Malaysian Grand Prix as a weekend trip. So, I mean, I'm glass house throwing stones at various points, but I didn't do that for a whole year and completely. That might be almost as bad as like doing the Asian swing in tennis, the jet lag and trouble with that. I mean, that is...
Mate, I'm booked in for 2 days covering tennis in Wuhan on the 7th and 8th of October. Start time 3 a.m. UK.
Oh, yeah, that's tough.
Say it.